Hey everybody, welcome back to Gideon Stuff. So, this month, July, I have reviewed two Benchmades that are pretty closely related. The Presidio 2, excuse me, and the Mini Presidio 2. These are both really cool knives, and I've had the opportunity to carry and use both of them extensively for several months at this point, thanks to channel member Zach. He sent these both into the channel. I really appreciate him for doing that. Now, I have said in both the reviews for these knives that I love them a lot. In fact, I think these are probably among Benchmade's best products ever, right? So, in this video, we're going to compare and contrast them, talk about what I like, what I don't like, and ultimately try to answer which one do I like better, if there is an answer. So, let's go ahead and get into it. All right, so a couple things to address. Number one, I'm not going to be comparing these in any way to the original Presidio because I've never handled an original Presidio. I don't have one here. But from what I hear, the original is just as good. So this is the 570-1. This is the 575-1. I would assume the originals were the same numbers without the dashes. I don't know. Interestingly enough, 575, this is one of the area codes for New Mexico phone numbers. In fact, I have a 575 number, so that's kind of cool. I know 505 is what everyone in New Mexico wants to have. In fact, in northern New Mexico where I grew up, most of it is 505, but there are still 575 spots, and we're getting way off topic. Anyways, quick overview of the two knives. The materials are exactly the same on both of these. We have S30V on the blades, and we have CF Elite for the scales. Obviously, crossbar lock, steel pocket clips, steel liners, phosphor bronze washers. The blade shapes are same category, but there are actually some differences in the blade shape that we'll talk about here in a second. CF Elite. It's carbon fiber reinforced nylon. It's an interesting material. It's very lightweight. It's very strong. To me, all FRNs, GRNs, fiberglass reinforced nylon. What were the other ones? Just glass reinforced nylon, I think is what GRN is. Anyways, they're all kind of the same to me. It's not a bad handle material at all, but to me, it's just kind of the same as everything else. That's kind of beside the point here. If you want more information on the materials and stuff, you can check out my full reviews for either of these knives. The full review for the Mini guy actually came out yesterday, so should be pretty easy to find. All right, let's go ahead and start comparing these two knives against each other directly. The size difference between these two is striking. The Presidio is a big knife. This is absolutely ginormous. And as such, the Mini is not really a mini knife. It's smaller than the big guy, but I would still consider this to be a full-size EDC knife. Now, this is not just the exact same thing shrunk, right? Scaled down. There are actually quite a bit of design features that have changed between the two. I'm assuming that the large design is the, original design, the first design, and then they shrunk it to make the smaller one. But they did some changes that I find to be very interesting. So let's go ahead and look at those a little bit more closely. The first difference I want to talk about is the handles, ergonomics. I think that's the most obvious way, or the most obvious difference that a lot of people are going to notice between the large one and the small one is how they feel in hand, how they feel in pocket, things like that. Again, the Presidio is a big knife. This is a very large knife. Super comfortable. The ergonomics on these knives are outstanding. You can see here, I don't have massive hands. I've got a lot of room here. I think most people are going to have a lot of room. The handle is very intelligently shaped. It kind of flares out here at the front, and that acts as a natural guard, keeping you from running up on the edge, assisted by the jimping that we have on the bottom and the top. Also works as a thumb ramp here for a saber grip. The texture on the two knives is the same as well. So tactily, they feel very, very similar. Good grip, good traction. You have the same kind of jimping and the same kind of forward flare on the smaller guy as well, which again gives you that kind of protection from running up on the blade. They both have this flat spot on top of the spine. Obviously, you have more real estate on the big guy, so if you want to rest your thumb there, it makes a little more sense on the big one. On the little one, I kind of put my thumb half on the flat spot, half back here, at which works just fine, because if I extend my thumb more fully, I'm on top of the swedge, and it's a little bit thin and just a little bit uncomfortable. So if you're someone that likes to put your thumb, kind of far down the blade to get a little bit of that leverage from the back, the big guy is going to be better for you because you've got more real estate to land that thumb, which does make sense for the bigger knife. You might be pushing this through bigger cuts. You might be, trying to use this one a little bit harder, so that gives you a good spot to get some real power down on there. Now, in terms of thickness, they're not as far off as you might think. So the little one is definitely thinner, but it is not a thin knife. I would still consider this to be a pretty chunky little knife. In fact, in a comment section discussion I had with someone, they mentioned that this is kind of like if the Bug Out had full steel liners, which I'm not sure I 100% agree with, but this does kind of feel like the Bug Out if it was working out. So maybe this is the Benchmade workout. I'm so proud of that joke. I hope you guys can tell. I think that's freaking hilarious. Maybe one day Benchmade will make a workout. That'd be funny. But yeah, this knife is very, very hand-filling, especially for a knife that's on the smaller side. Again, this is not what I consider to be a mini knife, but it is a, smaller or average size EDC knife. So in the hand, these give you two very different feelings. If you're someone that has very, very large hands, you're automatically going to want to go for the bigger guy, and I think that's a good choice. The ergonomic lines are very neutral, so there's not going to be anything really prohibiting you from carrying and using this comfortably. Now, if you have, medium-sized hands or smaller hands like me, you can still use the big guy too. These ergos, again, they're very, very well thought out, and no matter what your hand size is, I think you're going to be able to lock in. Now, if you're going to be using this in tactical scenarios, or if you're going to be using this as a work knife, it's going to be very friendly to gloves, excuse me, because it's so wide and because there's so much grip, and it just gives it a little bit of versatility. Now, for the smaller knife, very, very comfortable. You're very locked in. This has a more compact feeling, but I would not say that it is as versatile as a bigger guy just because it's smaller. When you shrink something down, you make it a little bit more finicky to use. If you're going to be someone who's wearing gloves a lot and you're looking for a good work knife, you might have some trouble actuating the thumb studs or the crossbar lock. And in that case, I'd say, go with the big guy just for ease of use. So ergonomically, they are very different. These do feel like two very, very different knives in the hand. Let's talk about in the pocket. Yes, they carry very, very differently. This is a big knife. This does not fold up into a compact package. This one does. I've got a couple of knives sitting here. Let's see, what's a good comparison knife? Yeah, I've got this I've got this VV Vision FG sitting here right now. We'll put that there. Yeah, the big knife is quite large. The little guy is quite thick. This is definitely going to carry a little bit more like a brick. This one's going to carry a little bit easier. This is more lightweight. I really enjoyed carrying this knife. This is one of my favorite backpacking knives and one of my favorite adventuring knives. If I'm out in the backcountry and I have to walk miles and miles and miles, I prefer this one because it has the robust, overbuilt durability of the big guy, but it is a much lighter, much more compact and easy to carry package. This knife does fold up into what I consider to be a pretty compact little shape, fairly thin profile. So this is a joy in the pocket. They do have the same pocket clip you can see here, and I like having a longer pocket clip on smaller knives. It helps keep them in the pocket better, but I also think it helps out ergonomically. And on this knife, yeah, you do not feel the pocket clip in your hand at all. I'm glad I didn't put like a Bug Out clip on here because I think that would have that would have really bothered me. But yeah, if mobility, ease of carry is something that really concerns you, this is definitely the one to go with. And that's kind of a no-brainer, right? It's smaller, it's lighter, no shit, Gideon. Yeah, I know. Okay, let's go ahead and let's compare the actions. The action is definitely better on the small one. The big guy is not bad, but that blade's a little bit heavy. And even though I've been carrying this knife a lot, it just hasn't, it's broken in really nicely, but that blade is pretty heavy and sometimes it resists swinging shut. The little guy, not only does it have a lighter blade, but I actually think the thumb studs are positioned a little bit better. I don't know, the thumb studs here just feel a little more natural, a little bit easier to get to. Maybe that's because it's more of a reach on the big knife, but in a couple of ways, if you hold the knife here, maybe your thumb's reaching up a little bit more. It's a little bit further away from the scales. On the little one, you can see here that they're close to scales, but not too close. And this chamfer on the side here just kind of guides your thumb into that. The little one's also just incredibly smooth on its washers. This is something that's probably going to vary knife to knife, but the weight of the blades really isn't. And even though this does have a very solid, very good action for a large knife, this one does have a better action. And I think a lot of it does have to do with the weight of the blade and position of the thumb studs. All right, let's compare the blades. Now, this is the part that I've been really wanting to get to because this is the part that I think is the most interesting. Okay? These do not have the same blade shape in my mind. I don't know if you guys can see this, but I definitely can. This seems more like a drop point to me, and this seems more like a spear point. It seems to me like on the smaller one, we drop down to the tip way more quickly, way sharper. And on the large guy, it's kind of more gradual and drawn out. Now, both tips are very much in line with the center of the pivot. So access to the tips is very good. On this little guy, of course, you're going to have a lot of control over the tip because the blade is so small. You can get your finger, halfway down the blade for your utility cuts. But let's talk about the tips. Let's go ahead and compare these. The smaller knife actually has a more robust tip than the larger knife for a couple of reasons. Number one, this is a shorter blade, and because this is a saber height flat grind, there's not much room to drop from the full thickness to the final apex. The other thing is that this blade is not substantially thinner than the large guy. It's a little bit thinner. The blade stock does start out a little bit thinner, but not by much. And so with the big knife, because you have a much more broad blade, you have a lot more time to come down to the edge, a lot more time to grind away material. And so you do end up with a slightly thinner edge. Also, the swedge on the top is done just ever so slightly differently. You can see here on the little guy, the swedge kind of comes out almost completely to the tip. It stops about right there. On the bigger knife, it stops way further back, about right there. So you have that much that's just tip grind. And on this one, you really only have that little bit there, which is proportionally quite different between the two. And so this creates an interesting scenario where the big knife does actually cut. It is slicier than the little knife. The little knife is not bad, okay? Do not get me wrong. This is not a bad cutter. It's a good cutter. It's a fine cutter. This is going to be, in fact, I'd say this is a great generalist. But this knife does have better geometry. The big knife, does cut better. So, in a lot of ways, this is the better tool when it comes to just analyzing the blades. Now, the S30V is the same between the two. Sharpening choil is done almost, actually not really. I was going to say almost identically. It's not really that identical, but you do get about the same amount of sharpening out of both of them. S30V from Benchmade is a completely adequate steel. I don't really have very many problems with it. I think it's a pretty good steel. I don't think it's as good as Spyderco's, but a 30V is just a good steel, and Benchmade's been using it for a long time. They do kind of know what they're doing with it. So there's kind of the main differences between these two knives. What happens when you change the size on the same design? Well, you get a knife that is more compact, easier to carry, more lightweight, at the sacrifice of some blade geometry and I guess accessibility, just because, you know, the smaller knife handle is going to limit grips. If you got big hands, you're not going to like this one at all. This one's a little bit more accepting. Big hands and small hands can use this knife. So, which one do I like better? All right, so here's a part of the video where I give my subjective, or not subjective, objective, my bad, opinion and I guess analysis on these two knives. Which one do I like better? I carried this one more. I do find the size of this knife very, very compelling. I don't think there's enough knives in this category. You know, small or, I don't know, regular, average size EDC knives that maintain a robust, overbuilt quality. You know, this is an overbuilt knife. It's got that a little bit thicker geometry. It's got this massive stop pin. It's got the crossbar lock. It's got washers. This is a very, very cool knife. This packs a lot of power into a small package. And I think that's one of the reasons why I enjoyed carrying this knife backpacking so much, because the size and weight ratio to, I don't know, badassery is kind of unbeatable. Now, if I was just concerned with using the knife, with working with the knife, let's say I'm back in the mountains working as a cowboy. Let's say that we're doing irrigation ditches, right? Okay, what am I going to have to do working irrigation ditches? Well, I'm going to have to cut tarp, going to have to cut rope, going to have to, you know, be working with sandbags, got to cut through those strings, going to have to be whittling wood to create stakes to brace things. I'm going to be cutting a lot of different mediums. I need something that's going to be very comfortable in my hand that I can use for an extended period of time. I need something that's going to cut very well. I think the big one is undoubtedly the winner in that regard. If you're looking for a knife that's going to be a dedicated, heavy-duty user, you're going to want to go for the big one. If you're just looking for a kind of do-everything EDC or a backpacking adventure knife type of thing, I would recommend the small one. Which one do I like better? Even though I carried this one more, and even though, you know, backpacking stuff is one of my favorite hobbies, I do like the big one more. And this one I went back and forth on the whole time I was carrying these two things, but I do prefer the large one. Again, this knife is a good knife, and this is a great EDC knife. I love the size of this knife. I love the size. But there were a couple times where I'm making cuts, where I'm trying to use that tip, and I'm like, why is this tip so robust? You know, and that's not a problem that you have with the big guy. I'm a huge fan of big knives. I don't carry them as much as I used to, but I'm a huge fan of big knives, and I'm an even bigger fan of big knives that have well-done geometry. This absolutely has that ethos, that type of geometry. Very, very well done flat grind. You've got a little bit of straight, a little bit of belly. This drop point blade is absolutely amazing in terms of versatility. I also think this knife looks better, the big one. I don't know, there's something about the little guy that's just a little bit, again, the blades are pretty different to my eye, and I just like the looks of the bigger one better. They're both great knives. I love them both. I do prefer the big knife. But this is going to be a strange caveat. If someone came and told me tomorrow, like, okay, we're taking away all your knives. They're holding me at gunpoint. They're saying, we're taking away all your knives. You have to choose just one folding knife for the rest of your life, and you can only pick between these two. I am probably going to pick the small one. Because I do think that even though it's not as impressive from a performance standpoint, it's still very, very good. And there are, the carryability is huge. Carryability is huge. I can take this basically anywhere. Now, I did go rock climbing and, you know, backpacking with this knife too, and it's fine. Like, I don't mind carrying a bigger knife, but this knife made a huge difference. So there we go. It's a very complicated, you know, question. I do prefer the big one. I think if we're just, you know, zooming out as far as we possibly can, I do think this is my favorite. This one is the better one, but I do carry this one more because that size is super, super compelling. So there we go. There are the Benchmade Presidios compared. Love these knives. They're both really, really cool knives. I recommend them both wholeheartedly. Hopefully this video here helped you decide which one you want to get. Oh, I guess one thing we should talk about is probably the price. This knife is $25 cheaper than the big one. This is $250 and this is $225, which I actually think, you know, considering Benchmade's prices, I don't think those are priced horribly. I really, really would have rather seen this one be $200 and this one be $225, but as it is, especially compared to a lot of other stuff in Benchmade's catalog, I don't think these are outrageously priced. Of course, in a, you know, maybe in a in an ideal world, right? This would be more like, I don't know, 170-ish. And this would be more like 190, 200, but, you know, is what it is. They are probably $25 to $50 overpriced, but again, for Benchmades, I think these do offer a lot of value, and they are just really, really excellent knives. So I do recommend them highly. But that's it for today's video, guys. Big shout out to my channel members at the Cowboy level. I appreciate everything you do for the channel. If you want to become a member and support me directly, there's a link down below. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment below, and subscribe. Until next time, I've been Gideon. I'll see you in the next one. Adios.